Hello, welcome to this AVLAND video review of the Denon AVR-2113. We're going to show you the features of this unit, how to set it up, its on-screen menus, and ultimately what we think of it. The 2113 from Denon is a 7.1 AV receiver. It has 95 watts per channel and features HDMI 1.4, allowing for compatibility with 1080p and 3D content. It will also do 4K content and even upscale to 4K as well as 1080p. It has an audio return channel over HDMI, allowing the sound to come from your television back to the amplifier without having any additional cables that go back down HDMI, as long as your television has got that on as well. It's a new design from last year's internally, slightly different on the front from last year's model from Denon at the same price point. But the internals are completely different. They've made much of an improvement to the actual audio quality of this receiver. The components used inside, the size of the transformer, everything about it seems much better. And they've put, one of the things they're making a great deal about is that they're putting separate transistors on each channel of amplification. Now on the front there's a little plastic flap that you can push off. Reveals the HDMI input on the front, the auxiliary HDMI, which has got 6 HDMIs, the other 5 are on the back. It's got an iPad connection on the front, which will charge it up to 1 amp, and then analog video and audio inputs, as well as the setup mic input is where that is as well. It has Dolby True HD decoding, as well as Dolby Pro Logic 2Z, DTS HD master audio, and it also has an FM RDS tuner. But it does lack an AM tuner. That's something they've took off this year's model. It has Odyssey Multi-EQ XT auto setup and room EQ. It has dynamic EQ and dynamic volume from Odyssey as well. Now not only will it pass through the 4K, it will also do its GUI, which is quite unusual at the moment. It will do its on-screen menus over the top of a 4K signal. Can't verify this because we've got no 4K displays at the moment, but I'm sure in time that we will. It's future-proofing, which is a good thing at this sort of price point. On the back panel, we've got analog inputs with 4 traditional phono inputs, and you can see there next to it the FM aerial input, but I said before, no AM. You have only a subwoofer pre-out, coaxial and optical digital inputs, analog composite video inputs 2, and as well as the monitor out, and components. So if you've got like an old Xbox or a Wii, you can plug it in there and it'll output to HDMI, it'll upconvert the signal to HDMI. It also has 5 HDMI inputs, which can be assigned to different inputs. Here's your speaker connections. There's 7 channels of those, and the 0.1 is the subwoofer. So actually only 7 amps inside that actually amplify. You can assign 2 of them though to do different things. So the 2 on the end that surround back, you can either have them bi-amp the front channels if you're only using it as 1, or have them as a zone 2. Now all the terminals, as you can see here, have binding posts that can either take bare wire or 4mm banana plugs, and you just prise out those buttons as I showed you. This is what you get in the box. You get the remote control and batteries. One criticism I would have of the remote control is it doesn't have a number pad. It's got the inputs and sort of navigation for the menus, but there's no number pad. So if you want to use it to control a CD player or DVD player or Blu-ray player, you can't do that with it. You get your mains lead, you get a very, very basic FM aerial, and the Odyssey setup microphone. Now all they provide you with is a quick start guide, and the actual rest of the manual is available on this CD-ROM. Or you can just download it from the Denon's website, the full instruction manual. But there's no big, thick manual like you used to get with these. Now, onto the setup menus. As you can see here, you can overlay the menus over the top. This is the sort of basic sort of pop-up menu that's in the receiver. If you're in the middle of watching something and you just want to tweak different things. Here you can see the audio delay. You can change that per input up to 200 milliseconds. You can change the volume. You can limit the volume as well to a certain level. And you can set whether what level it powers up on. I mean, most people just want that to be the last. Here's some of the Odyssey settings for the auto setup. And moving in now to the video menu, the setup menu, you can adjust things like the contrast. I wouldn't recommend doing this in your amp, I'd do it in your display device, but it can be done. Useful is perhaps if you've got an old analog source that you want to adjust, but I would just do it. I would just do it in your television normally. In the HDMI settings, you can set whether you want auto lip sync or not. I don't know how effective that is. It's something I would probably just leave switched off. Whether the HDMI audio out is going to be through the TV or from the receiver. The video mode of the video input output settings, whether you've got conversion or scaling switched on, and then different options come up depending on what you want to do. Whether you want to upscale the VGC to 4K. I would, in the main, leave it to just pass through. If you're just watching a lot of Blu-rays, you just want to pass the signal through whatever the Blu-ray's at. But if you've got a lot of old DVDs, you might find that the scaler built into this, as it's more modern than what's perhaps in your DVD player or in your television, depending on the age of your television, is better. But have a play around with it and see. You can change also what formats, whether it's PAL or NTSC. For the UK, you just want to leave that to PAL. You can change the name of the inputs here and also assign them to being different things. So if you want HDMI 2 to take the sound from optical or coaxial, this is useful in the UK for Sky because it doesn't carry Dolby Digital on a lot of the boxes down the HDMI. It'll only carry 2-channel stereo, so you have to use the optical out on a Sky HD box, and that's one of the reasons you'd want to do that. Also, again, if you've got an old games console that's only got analog out and you want to assign it to component video in and optical or coaxial. This is where you rename the inputs, so you might want to change that to the name of your Blu-ray player or DVD player, or whatever. You might be using inputs for something completely different. You might want to show the satellites being Sky or your cable box, whatever the brand of box it is. Quite useful for people who are not too familiar for using the amplifier. They can just switch it on and just turn the input selector and just find what they're looking for a lot easier if you've renamed them. Here you can set where the inputs, whether it defaults to HDMI, whether the decoding mode is PCM or DTS there. I'd just leave it on auto, should work fine. This is where you can change the actual video source depending on which audio signal. So you might want to maybe have something on the television but be listening to something from CD. You can do that. Here's the Odyssey setup. That's where you'd go if you were going to do the Odyssey setup there. This is where you assign what you want those extra channels to do, whether they're Zone 2, whether they're biamp, or whether they're the 6th and 7th channels of 7-channel. Or they can repeat what's on the front channel, so they can be a speaker B as well. It's completely up to you how you want to use it, but that's where you do it. The speaker configuration is where you set which size speakers you've got, whether they are small or large. Generally speaking, whether they're satellite speakers or whether they're full-size, full-range speakers. And it will put more of the bass through the subwoofer if you set it to small. If you set it to large, it will have more going through the fronts or centre or surrounds. So general rule of thumb, if you're using a subset system, set them to small. If you're not, leave them on large. This is where you set you can set the frequency that the subwoofer pre-out outputs to your sub. It's useful on a lot of subs now. They have a direct LFE input that bypasses any frequency adjustment that they have. It's better to do it in the amplifier, so you can just hook that straight in and then adjust it in your amplifier. From where you're going to be sitting, it's a lot easier. This is where you change the distance. If you're not using the Odyssey, will work this out for you. But if you're manually setting it up, which is what I personally prefer to do, this is where you'd go in and you'd adjust that. Here you can set the levels as well. Again, I prefer to do that with either my own ears or a sound meter, but the Odyssey again will do that as well. You can go in afterwards and you can tweak it after the Odyssey's done it, so it's not the be all and end all. different things appear on here. You could tell it, for instance, you're not using a centre speaker if you're just starting out. Here's where you set the crossover frequencies as well on the speakers. If you've set it to small, you can adjust what frequency it crosses over at and then puts the rest of the sub. If you set it to large, it puts all the frequencies to each speaker. So that changes depending on what you've selected in that speaker config menu. So you set them all to small and you can go back in and do that. Now, if you set the amp sign up, we've got it set to biamp there, but we'll change it to front B. You can then adjust the front speaker setup. That was greyed out, and you can now say whether you want it to be on with the speaker B to be on when it's just 2-channel playback, or whether it's multi-channel playback. So useful if you've got another set of speakers that you want to replicate what's in your main room, only for music. So when you're watching a film, it doesn't repeat it, but when you listen to music, it does repeat it. Networking here, you can see it tells you exactly what the IP address is, whether you've got the DHCP server switched on or off, whether you have it IP control on or off, in standby, which it saves more power if it's turned off. You can edit the network name. You can manually go in and change the IP address, which is what we've done. It avoids a lot of issues if you do that. You can change here what the last FM display is, and this is what the web access port is, which is 10443. Some general settings here, the language of the actual setup menus and on-screen graphics. They're the different languages you can set it. You've got a grayed out menu there for zone 2, so we'll just go back in and we'll just adjust it so that we set it to zone 2, just so we can show you that menu. So go back down and show you what's in that zone 2 setup menu. Here you can adjust the different levels, so useful if the speakers aren't exactly centered. Maybe in a kitchen you've got ceiling speakers. You can limit the volume so people can't turn it up too loud, especially if they're only small speakers. That's quite useful. Or it's somewhere where you don't want people making too much noise. And you can rename the second zone as well, so you might say kitchen. You can have the receiver go into auto standby if it doesn't have a signal for so many minutes. I prefer to have it switched off because I generally can remember to switch it off. You can adjust the brightness of the dimmer, because it can be quite bright maybe, especially if you've got it quite close to where you're sitting. Here's some general information. It tells you what's coming in, what signals are coming into the receiver, what's going out again, back out to the monitor. You can see that there it's reporting back what the television we've got it hooked up to can do. And there's what's going on in the main zone. That's what's going on in zone 2. And that's the version of the firmware. So if you know there's a more up-to-date one, you can update it online. It can also, I believe, be updated by USB as well. And you can also lock the setup. Stop someone from playing around with it. Right, we're going to take the lid off the AVR-2113 and show you the components that are inside the unit. So here inside you've got the main sort of HDMI board is on the left. That's got all the video processing, all the audio processing is all on that board, the upscaling and that sort of thing. To the right you've got the actual amplification, which is all on one board that's right next to the main heatsink. There in the middle of the screen at the moment you can see the transformer that powers the whole receiver, and part of it there's some capacitors as well that smooth out the current. You see the front display is linked there from a ribbon cable going across. There's an even bigger ribbon cable there linked to the front display. There's some more circuits there on the front panel. But it's got an awful lot in it. There's some boards actually underneath that main board as well for the analog. We'll just try and show you those as best we can in the transformer. But yeah, there's more in it, sort of multi-layered. So there's an awful lot in there for your money for what is a fairly middle of the range sort of budget product. It does have an awful lot packed into quite a small box as well. Now onto the networking. I'll show you the internet radio. When you connect it up to the internet, it will load a list of radio stations, and you can look at it by where you are. I'm going to choose here that we're in the UK, so I'm going to show you radio 2, and it takes a few seconds to start buffering, and then once it's got to 100%, it starts playing. It's showing you the format there is Windows Media Audio at 128 kilobits per second. Generally speaking, this is going to sound better than it would do on DAB and FM. So I would choose internet radio for the main stations over using FM. Here's where you use the DNA feature. We're using a NAS drive, and you can browse folders, which is useful if you just want to play back WAV files that don't have any tag, or files that don't have any tag information, and you've got them just stored in different folders. You can browse it that way and play things. Very useful if you store all your music as WAV files, or if your DNA server can't handle certain types of files, like some of them can't do FLAC tag information. It also brings up the album art for the album you're playing, which is quite neat. And it's quite quick, it's quite responsive, I've found, to go through. You can also use it in a conventional way with DLNA. We'll only play as well, we're just going to go to some FLAC files here. It will actually only play 96 kilohertz at the moment. We couldn't get it to play any 192 kilohertz. But here it is playing 96. And again, it brings up the album art pretty quickly and starts buffering very quickly as well. And that's 96 kilohertz. It doesn't seem to tell you, though, what the actual signal is. So, pros and cons. Pros: the sound quality, hi-fi sound quality for music, especially. It seems to be improved over last year's model, and if that's what you're looking for, primarily. Or mixed with home cinema as well, then it's very much worth considering this AV receiver. It's also quite good that it's got 4K scaling and pass-through, which future-proofs it, for future video formats. That's something I would find important myself. And the internal build quality that coupled with to the sound quality, obviously linked, they seem to have improved the components on what is a mid-price receiver. On the other side, though, on the flip side, the plastic fascia on it is very much sort of more down market. It'd be nicer if it had an aluminium front, but they have to make some compromises somewhere, and that's one of them. It's a bit perplexing that the remote control doesn't have a number pad on it. I don't quite know why that is. I guess they've gone for a more simplistic look, but it does sort of hamper its functionality a bit. And also, I would say that the thing that's a bit of a negative is that it only goes up to 96 kilohertz with its file playback across the network. It should really do 192, other receivers on the market do, so that's a bit of a shame too. But all round, it's a good receiver. It sounds good for home cinema, it sounds good for music. It's fairly neutral sounding, it's not too bassy, and we were pretty impressed with it when we set it up for the first time and listened to it. So I don't think you can really go wrong with the Denon AVR-2113. That's the end of the review of the Denon AVR-2113. If you'd like to see more reviews, please visit our website, avland.co.uk. You can also purchase this unit there. Thank you very much.